moment here, but today we're actually going to be doing a little bit of a different topic, and I'll share with you why in a moment. But today we're actually going to be talking about your donor database, and we're going to have a little bit of an open forum, mostly because I wanted to be able to utilize Carrie's presence here and really give you the opportunity to ask your questions, to go over some of the top ideas or thoughts that you might be having right now. She is such an amazing resource for those of you who have not had the opportunity to actually work with her. It's just such a great opportunity. So again, it's kind of a switch. I know that. I apologize for that, but let's just kind of go through what's going to be happening today. All right, so just a few reminders here. You can use the chat role as you like to ask your questions, make your comments. I'll be checking it throughout the session, so please do use that. If you don't want to unmute or talk throughout the session, you can feel free to use it. I'm going to add resources to our Google folder this time that are all going to be related to some of the topics we're talking about, as well as some great funding updates that we got from Melissa Gussman. For those of you who know her, she's one of our grant writers and an incredible resource for grants specifically. So I'll share a little bit more of those updates in just a moment. Feel free to reach out between sessions. I know I tell you guys this a lot, but you do have access to me, my email. If you do have any questions in between sessions, please don't hesitate to reach out. As you know, we only meet once a month. So I really want to make sure that this group is acting as a resource for you, both through email and also through our nonprofit community forum on Facebook. So if you have not already joined that, please do so and hop on there to ask any questions you might have in between our sessions, or even really to request a topic for our session as well. And then finally, I want to make sure that you're signed up for our newsletter so you can gain access to all of these amazing resources, as well as I oftentimes will send out in between sessions things that are happening online or in the community that I think are really amazing opportunities. So definitely make sure you are signed up for that. I will add those links to be able to join that in the chat box before we end our session today. All right, so what's going to happen today? We're going to go through a few very quick funding updates, not to spend too much time on that. Just want to share those reminders so that you head to that resource folder and you check out how to get onto those grant opportunities. I think they're two pretty amazing ones, and they're really flexible too. So this is a bit of a unique opportunity for those of you who are in all areas of our amazing nonprofit sector to sign up for these grant opportunities and have a really good chance, I think, of getting something back. We're going to have a bit of a change of plan. So for those of you who have been seeing the marking that's been going out, Dana Snyder could not join us today, unfortunately, but she's going to be with us next month, August 13th at 1 p.m. And she'll talk about that 4-step donor strategy to be able to utilize ads and get new donors engaged. Again, the reason we kind of switched it last minute was not only because she couldn't make it, but also because we have the amazing Carrie here. So we want to use that as an open forum. We're going to go through and kind of introduce Carrie and some new opportunities, and then we'll have an open Q&A to really talk about what's going on in your world and ask any questions that you might have. All right, anything so far before we jump into our topic for today on your donor database? No? All right, again, please use the chat box if you have any questions as we go along. All right, so for those of you who don't know how to find us, make sure you're subscribed to our Global Good channel by Canico. That's on YouTube. We will add all of our topics that we talk about here, as well as some amazing other topics as well that you can tune into, learn more about throughout the month. Make sure you're following us on Facebook and Instagram, as well as on LinkedIn. And of course, our nonprofit community forum is a great resource to reach out to all of us when we are not together in the month. All right, so our topic today is going to be your donor database. And by the end of this session, I really want to help you to understand 5 simple steps that you can take to organize and maintain your donor database so that you're really reaching your donors in the easiest and the best way possible. And then, of course, we're going to go through that open forum and answer all your current questions, go over any of your current needs, and really give you the opportunity, again, to use this amazing resource that we have as our guest today and just go through some of what's on your mind. So let's just jump right into your donor database. Again, we're going to be going through those 5 steps to really be able to organize and utilize your donor database. So I can't really see raise of hands, but I'm kind of curious. Just sound off in the chat box, put like a Y or N. Do you currently use a donor database system, like a CRM? Even if it's an Excel sheet, do you have some way that you are tracking your donors, you're tracking information about them? Some way to kind of understand more about who they are. So let's see. Okay, got one no, got it. All right. Yes, yes. Awesome. Okay, good. All right. Well, first and foremost, you want to have some way to really record information about who your donors are. I don't care if you have 5 donors, you want to really understand who is giving to your organization. So, the first step you want to talk about is where and how are you actually recording this information? How are you logging this data and where is it actually going? If you're not using a really highfalutin CRM system like some of our partners might, are you using an Excel sheet or a Google sheet? Maybe it's just a Word document for now. You want to have something that's efficient, easy to access, and in one place. Something that you can actually manage. I can't tell you how many times I've seen nonprofits have information about their donors in 10 different places, and
Mhm.
they don't know who they are, where they're coming from, or even how they're donating. They just know that maybe one day a check showed up and hey, great, they're helping us out. That's amazing. And trust me, I know that there are 1,000 other things on your plate. But I promise you, it'll be a lot easier if you have one place to just store some data about who these people are. So get to know a system. And if that system isn't working for you, whatever you're using now, try and find one that's in one place. Again, it doesn't matter if it's this really high tech CRM system or just an Excel sheet. Whatever it is, find a way to just understand what's going on with your donors. Consider how you can actually automate and integrate this information. Now, those are big words, oftentimes overwhelming ones that are talked about a lot in using social media and emails and whatnot. What I mean by that, though, is once you have a sense of who's giving, where they're giving, and how they're giving, you're actually going to be able to start to automate your own process. So, I'm not talking about robots in the background sending emails, I'm talking about how you handle your own donors. Maybe it's that every Friday you're looking at this system and you're sending your own email. That's a kind of automation and integration into your own life because we don't want to make this complicated. Finally, I want you to really consider who's going to manage it and what it's going to take to make this happen. I promise you, no matter how big or small your organization is, if you keep things in one place and you're identifying where these donors are coming from and really tracking it and logging it in the right way, this will be such an easy process for you. Number two is to know your goals. So, obviously, we all have goals to raise money, right? But it's more than that. So, you really want to gain insights and implement what you're going to be learning from this data. Maybe you're looking to actually increase your revenue month to month. Maybe you're a small organization, you're starting out, and you really want to build that momentum. But maybe you've been in existence a while and you're trying to gain more returning donors. These are very different goals. Obviously, both bring in money. I realize that. But ultimately, those goals are different. So you have to really understand what are you trying to learn from your data? Consider how you're engaging your donors. Is it through emails? Is it through a phone call? Is it through a social media post? How are you actually engaging them? And what is their giving history based on that engagement? Those are the two big metrics or data that you want to be able to track so that you can reach those goals. So, again, different goals mean different data, mean different insights, but you really want to make sure you're using it. So, you all have this data, whether or not you have a CRM or even whether or not you're tracking it. If you've received even one donation, this data exists. So really looking back at how did you get that donation? Where did the person come from? How were they engaged? And what is their giving history? Was it the first time they ever gave? Do they give to you every month, every 6 months? What happens every month for them that maybe they're giving? Start to think about what patterns are happening and connect them to your goals. All right, number three is how does your donor fit in your community? This is so big, you guys. I can tell you honestly, in all the nonprofits I've worked with, all the nonprofits I've spoke with, even all the nonprofits I've personally supported, I can only think of one who has done this, done it well. Let's leave it at that. Some try it, but done it well, and it's hard to do. So, what you're really looking for is how has your donor found you? What's their connection? Did they stumble upon you on Facebook? If so, I want to know who's doing your social media because they're doing a great job. It's hard to do though. People don't normally just stumble upon things. You want to know what is the connection between your organization and your donor. Maybe you're finding connections between donors. Are they friends? Do they work together? Did somebody else who donated to you post on their social media? Maybe it was a board member. This is where you start to use the word segmentation. I would be so curious to know, again, I can't see your hands, but if you have heard this before, please put in the chat box that you've heard about segmentation, because I feel like online or in these types of trainings, segmenting your donors is such a hot button topic, so much so that I feel like I've heard it maybe 1,000 times. And oftentimes when people talk about it, I'm just like, okay, great. And they don't really explain anymore. I'm seeing a few yeses. Yeah, right. And I'm sure when you've heard it from people, yeah, Constant Contact mentions it a lot. Definitely Olivia. Yeah. But you don't really use it because oftentimes you hear this word segmentation or segmenting your donors, and you don't really know what it means or even how to start doing that. So, what I'm here to tell you is that you don't have to do it all. Segmenting your donors is not this huge data driven, long winded process that's going to take up every single moment of your time. It really should be simple. What type of donor are they? Are they an individual or are they a company? It should only be one of those two things. Their gender. Now, that might seem kind of like controversial almost, but it's going to make sense in a bit, because what actually happens when you define their gender is if you start to decide, are they part of a family? Do they have kids? Are they, working from home? What kind of business are they in? That definition starts to define a lot more. So you want to define their gender. You want to define their region. What region of the United States are they in? Are they local to you or are they in some completely different place? What's their profession? Now, this actually goes back to gender a little bit, and not to put into play, these gender identifications, but when you identify their profession and you identify their gender, ironically, segmentation actually makes it a lot easier on you. It also makes it a lot easier when you start to send emails. So again, if somebody is a female who has 3 kids and is currently working from home, that email might look a lot different than a man who is a construction worker, is single, and is never home, right? Those are very different populations. So we just want to be defining general things about them. Finally, you want to talk about their location. Now, that sounds a lot like region, right? It's not. Their location could mean, do they live in an apartment? Do they live in a house? Do they live in a very high end area? Are they friends with people who are on the higher end? Maybe their profession determines their location. Maybe they commute to work. So these sound like really detailed pieces of information, but if you just stick to those 5 things, and again, I'm going to actually go into that in a little bit more detail and help you out even more with that, it will be very easy. We want to make sure that segmenting isn't so much that word, it's just finding out more. And I want to just make a quick note about this too, because if you're trying to upgrade your donor, so let's say someone made a $20 donation and they never donated again, if you're trying to upgrade them to be able to give you more, then you really want to consider segmenting by tiers so that your outreach makes sense. So what are tiers? If upgrading your donors is your number one goal, only segment by tier. So by that meaning, only segment by what they've given and what you think they're capable of giving. Does that make sense? Any questions about that so far? I'm going to take a quick look at the chat box. Once again, I feel like I might be talking too much. And I'll look back again to a little bit. Oh, cool.
Can I add in something, Diana?
Yeah.
So one of the things is, if any of you are listening to this, and especially if you're a younger nonprofit and you're a little overwhelmed by all of this, and you're thinking segment, I'm trying to just get John Smith's name in my system. I want you to think about it this way. One of the questions we get often from people that are as a young nonprofit, I don't understand. I know I'm doing much better in my program than X, which is a national organization. If I could just get in front of those big donors, they would fall in love with me too. Well, what those big national organizations are doing, and I realize you don't have the manpower, they're doing this segmentation. They're personalizing those letters. They're following that data. They have a big team to do it. So we want you to be familiar with these words, not just so you can leave here and go, oh, I can complete all these queries or fields in my donor database, but to help you kind of get a 101 on terminology. And then we're going to talk in a minute about what you can do kind of as a starting place with this. So don't be overwhelmed. The terms she's given are absolutely what we hear with large nonprofits, medium and small. So hang in there because these are important pieces that'll put it all together.
Yep, and also hang in there too, because I'm about to make it a lot more simple, not only with some more information, but also with a great template for those of you who don't use a CRM system. All right, so this is where it gets a little bit more simple. So you want to make sure that you have profiles for your donors. Now, this doesn't mean that if you have 1,000 donors, you're going to go into 1,000 different sections and add these details to each and every one. But what you want to start to think about is how do you collect as much data as you can with as simple a process as you can. So we talked in the last slide about 5 things you want to start to collect. So when you think about this data, when you think about that segmentation, especially for those of you who don't have a big system or a CRM that's maybe automating or doing it for you, you can start to think about 5 bits of data that will make a big difference in how your donors are showing up and giving to you. If you can look at their giving history, their biographical data, so that's like a formal word, but what I mean by that is where they go to school, where do they live, what do they do, what's their date of birth, because what does that mean? It could mean potentially a plan giving option, and any major accomplishments that maybe you can help them to celebrate. You know, maybe they just had a huge promotion or the birth of a child, or I mean, literally, it can be absolutely anything down to a birthday. You know, what can we highlight for these donors? What can we bring to light that makes them feel like they're human to us? They're not just another person. What's their contact information? I think that's an obvious one, and one that I would say probably 100% of you have on your donors already. What's the engagement history? Have they received every single one of your emails? Have they received a phone call? That could mean just having a section in a Excel sheet with a date that you contacted them last. And finally, if you have the opportunity to, wealth information. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean for those of you who do use a CRM that you're collecting like what's called windfall data. Windfall is where it actually will tell you somebody's net worth. It doesn't mean that. It means that, you know, maybe when you figure out where they live and what they do, if they're a doctor versus, you know, I don't know, something else, if they're like a high profile surgeon, then you can start to make plans for, okay, clearly this person is in a situation where I don't have to ask them for $5. I can actually be sending them and engaging them in opportunities that are a bit larger. So we can start to make assumptions about donors based on these 5 bits of data that will, again, prove really helpful in how you engage and how you actually clean up who these people are to you. Okay, finally, we've gone through all this. We've taken a look at some of the data. Now we actually have to use it. So great, you're tracking it. You're tracking when donors make a gift. You've maybe even tracked when you make a phone call or send out an email. But so what? Is it actually helping you? Instead of thinking about all of the things that you're putting into a system or an Excel sheet, I want you to just start to think about really simple processes to make these things work. So even if you don't have the time or the capacity right now to actually segment or to use a CRM or even to dive deeper into their profiles, I want you to start to think about tracking when they make a gift. So what time of a year was it? When do they give more frequently? So if you have people who give gifts multiple times, think about when that is. If they've lapsed, and if so, when? And when have they given more generously? So those are like the big things that you can do to use your data. So again, kind of going back, if you don't have the time to segment, or if it's maybe too overwhelming right now, think about these chunks. When do they make a gift? When do they give more frequently? When have they lapsed? And when have they given more generously? Then use that data to retarget them. And by retarget, I mean send them a more specific email, call them, touch base. Maybe they gave something that was really generous and they went from $20 to $100. For a lot of people, that's a big deal. And maybe it had something to do with something that you shared. Touch base with them. I promise you it's worth it. And oftentimes, those people who are giving $20 to $100 can give a lot more. All it takes is just that personalization. So again, I just wanted to kind of go through these 5 top tips we had as you go through your database, whether or not you have a database. These are great tips, even as you just look at who your donors are. So before we move on, are there any questions about what we just went over? I know it was a lot of information. I promise you will get this slideshow as well as some templates to be able to use as you start to talk